On this episode of RevHang, Ben and I talk about the PPG 375 at Texas Motor Speedway and the Australian Grand Prix. Let's do it. Hello everybody and welcome back to RevHang. I'm Nathan and alongside me virtually is my good friend, co-host, and former Formula SAE engineer and team principal, Ben Bagley. How you doing, Ben?
Formula SAE engineer seems a bit generous. I prefer paperwork guy, but I appreciate it all the same. It's going pretty good. Waiting for the rain to stop so I can get back on a motorcycle, but aside from that, it's been going pretty well. There were some really good races last week.
Yes, we did have some good races last week. Two of them, and it's not often we get both races in both series popping off like they did. So I'm very excited to dive right in this week. We'll start with the IndyCar PPG 375. This took place at Texas Motor Speedway, one of the most legendary tracks in the United States, whether you're a NASCAR fan or IndyCar fan. And boy howdy, did we have quite the race this week.
Yeah, a pretty good introduction to oval racing for the season.
I would very much say so.
A pretty good way to start it off.
Yeah, if you've never seen an oval race and you just think it's boring stuff, just left turns, while it is just left turns, I would highly recommend starting off with the PPG 75 or 375 of 2023. It was fantastic. It was entertaining the entire time. So, we'll start with qualifying and give you the top 10, just to give you some context. On pole position was the McLaren of Felix Rosenqvist, followed by Scott Dixon, Alexander Rossi, Joseph Newgarden, Pato O'Ward, Takuma Sato, Alex Palou, Will Power, David Malukas, and Colton Herta.
Yeah, one thing I love about IndyCar is how much this order gets shaken up throughout the race.
Yes, absolutely, because you would think that the top 10 really matters in qualifying, but in an oval race especially, it does not at all.
Nope.
So, definitely good qualifying from Felix, and also a good one from David Malukas. But on ovals, it's so close between the field. I think first to last, the difference between first and last was 0.9 seconds, looks like. And there were 28 cars, so that's pretty insane.
Yeah.
But even then, on an oval, 0.9 seconds is an eternity, so...
Yeah, the laps were, 24 seconds-ish?
Something like that, because they run... Yeah, not even, because they run 2 laps for qualifying, and the qualifying time was 47 seconds, so it was, 23.5 seconds is the average time.
Yeah, so that's how you get through 375 laps in a pretty quick time, in case it seems like a really big number. It is, but it goes by really quick.
Yeah, you look away from the lap counter, and then you look back, and it's been 20 laps, and you're like, whoa.
Yeah.
That was fast. But yeah, it was very entertaining. Highly recommend watching this race, but regardless, we will go through the race highlights just to give you a quick rundown. Joseph Newgarden got a great start at the jump, or great jump at the start, rather. It quickly took the lead after only a couple laps with Pato O'Ward in tow. We went around, O'Ward and Newgarden kind of just pulled away from the rest of the field, but on lap 48, Takuma Sato hit the wall and caused the first caution of the race. On lap 53, Kyle Kirkwood hit Alexander Rossi in the pit lane as they pit under caution, causing damage to both cars, but Rossi was the one who went a few laps down. And Rossi actually incurred a drive-through penalty as well, even though there was drama as to whether or not it was Kyle Kirkwood's fault or Rossi's fault. It was determined it was Rossi's fault. Rossi's team released him early. I did not particularly agree with the decision based on what the commentators were saying, but it is what it is.
Yeah, even if they'd released him early, he at least would have seen Kirkwood if Kirkwood had been in the correct lane.
Yes. But regardless, Rossi was the one who got the penalty. The race restarted. It was once again O'Ward and Newgarden going around and pulling away from the rest of the field. On lap 129, Pato O'Ward took the lead from Joseph Newgarden and started to pull away on his own on a completely different strategy.
Yeah, hearing on the radio, his team's like, all right, feels good, just go for it. Watching
Yeah,
him take off was awesome.
Pato was in a league of his own that race, for sure. On lap 178, Felix Rosenqvist got loose and hit the wall, unfortunately for him, causing a caution and ending his race. Newgarden, O'Ward, and Palou swapped the lead several times on the restart. That was a pretty fun battle to watch. On lap 209, Stingray Robb hit the wall and broke his toe link, eventually sending him down the track and into the inside wall pretty hard. This caused another caution and ended his race. That was kind of a scary crash. We watched it happen live, and it was, rough
There's
hit.
a lot of energy in that, yeah.
Yeah, but he was fine. He ended up being just A-okay, which was awesome to see, because I was not convinced that he would just jump out of the car like he did. But that's just a testament to the safety of these Dallara chassis. Like we talked about this a couple episodes ago, I think that the Dallara chassis are insanely well protected.
Yeah, absolute tanks.
Yep. On the restart, Pato O'Ward retook the lead, and on lap 222, just a few laps after the restart, DeFrancesco hit the wall and lost control on the bottom of the track, sending him back up the track and into the path of Graham Rahal, ending both of their races. Rahal ended up having kind of an airplane crash. It was a little scary there, but both drivers were okay. There's really nothing Rahal could have done to avoid DeFrancesco at the speed he was going. So it was just unfortunate for him. Not his fault at all, but that was his race done. The last 12 laps were a rush with an intense battle for the lead between O'Ward, Newgarden, Palou, and Malukas, of all people.
Yeah, all of a sudden Lucas came out of nowhere, and I was like, who is this guy? I had to wait for them to tell me his name before I realized it.
Yeah, and even Grosjean was up in the front of the field.
Yeah, that was really cool to see.
Yeah, for an oval, Grosjean's really picked up ovals pretty quickly. He's only been in the sport a couple years. So it was kind of awesome to see Grosjean up at the front until on lap 248 he washed out and hit the wall, ending his race. Oh, man.
Yeah.
And then that caused a caution, the last caution of the race, but the caution came out as the white flag was being waved, so the race did finish under caution. We did not go to overtime, and so Joseph Newgarden finished first under caution.
Yeah.
Right.
I thought for sure Pato O'Ward had that.
I did too. I think if the race did not end under caution, it would have been very close, but I do think Pato was probably setting Newgarden up for a last lap pass.
Yeah.
Because Pato was, like we keep saying, in his own league that whole race. He was just flying. At one point in the race, Newgarden and O'Ward were the only two cars on the lead lap.
Yep.
Which is pretty crazy.
Everyone just had a -1 next to their name.
Yep, Grosjean was the leader of the lapped cars in third place.
Yeah.
A full 24 seconds down on an oval, which is just nuts.
Yeah.
But, unfortunately, it did not pan out for Pato. He finished second. We'll go through the results real quick. Winning the race, like we said, was Joseph Newgarden, followed by Pato O'Ward and Alex Palou on the podium. Fourth and fifth were David Malukas and Scott Dixon. 6 through 10 was Scott McLaughlin, Colton Herta, Marcus Ericsson, Callum Ilott, and Helio Castroneves. 11 through 15 was Rinus VK, Augustine Canapino, Ed Carpenter, Romain Grosjean, and Benjamin Peterson. Just to note, Romain Grosjean did finish 14th because he was a couple of laps ahead of the rest of the cars, and when he crashed, there were only 2 laps left in the race, so he did technically finish ahead of them. 16 through 20 was Will Power, Simon Pagenaud, Jack Harvey, Christian Lundgaard, and Connor Daly. 21 through 25 was Santino Ferrucci, Alexander Rossi, Devlin DeFrancesco, Graham Rahal, and Stingray Robb. We're into the DNFs now, starting with Devlin in 23rd place, and then the rest of the field was Felix Rosenqvist, Kyle Kirkwood, Takuma Sato. All right. So, very, very awesome race. It was super entertaining, especially at the end. lots of cautions, lots of different strategies going on, and Pato absolutely flying.
Yeah, those safety cars really hurt him, or else he would have probably been a lap ahead of everyone for the entire race.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was very interesting because Newgarden was able to pit under one of the, I think, the second to last safety car to refuel. He basically got a free stop, and unfortunately Pato was unable to react to that, and that was what made the rest of the race really spicy, is because Newgarden, while his car was heavier because he had more fuel, he did not have to worry about hitting a fuel number and fuel saving at all, where Pato did have to fuel save quite heavily. But then the last caution, I believe, bailed him out quite a bit in that regard, and he was able to pit. Or, I don't know if he pit again, actually. I don't think he did. I think he just was able to go around slowly enough to fuel save to get to the point where he didn't have to fuel save anymore.
Yeah.
But regardless, it was quite the strategy battle and a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah. Another thing is they ran, was it NASCAR Truck Series earlier on for the IndyCar race?
Yeah, the day before.
Yeah, and they got a whole bunch of rubber right along the top of the track instead of just a single line, which generally in ovals you have the lower down line where there's traction, and then you have everywhere else, especially up top where there's not. That's where all the marbles and rubber and debris get shunted up. But there was a lot of racing where people were just able to kind of hang out in that upper line and make some pretty cool passes.
For sure. That had, I think, a lot to do with how good the race was. Because there were several cars like Pato and Scott Dixon, and there were a few people that just had the top line absolutely figured out and that were able to utilize it better than other cars. And those were the cars that were very racy and fun to watch.
Yeah.
But it was kind of up in the air at the beginning of the race because the Truck Series ran there, like you said, and they use a different kind of rubber on their tires, and so no one was really sure how sticky that top line was going to be until the race started, because the two different types of rubber, the two different compounds, don't stick together as well as the same compound would. But it ended up working out just fine.
Yeah. Apparently, it's enough. I mean, it didn't give you perfect traction. Stingray Rob can attest to that. But it definitely helped the racing, I think.
Absolutely. Grosjean is having a pretty poor start to his season, unfortunately. I love the guy. He gets a lot of crap from a lot of people, and honestly, kind of deservedly so. But you can't help but love the guy. He's moved to America, absolutely loving his life right now. It's a great story, especially if you know how his Formula One career ended. The fact that he's back in a race car and killing it in IndyCar is awesome to see. But this season has not been the smoothest start for him.
No, and he's shown like so much like progress and promise this season just in these two races.
Yes.
So
absolutely,
it sucks to watch him have these problems early on. So hopefully he can get kind of back on track and turn the potential into actual points.
Yes, absolutely. He's been on the top of the field both races so far, and unfortunately has crashed out at the very end of both of them. The first one was definitely not his fault, but this one was arguable. He kind of just got cut off. He got passed by a car, which kind of took his downforce away, and he washed out into the wall on the top of the track. Technically his fault, but at the same time, it's a very tricky situation when you lose all your downforce in the middle of turn 2.
Yeah, that's an experience thing too.
For sure. And that's just something with ovals that he's going to have to learn. And he, I think, probably learned it the hard way there. But hopefully he can take this experience and figure out what to do next time so it doesn't happen again. But wouldn't it be a crazy story if he came back and won the Indy 500 or something? That would be insane.
Marcus Ericsson would beat him up, I think.
Maybe. We'll see. He was the winner last year. Sneaky Swede, as they call him.
Yeah. No, I'm supposed to be the European who wins oval races.
Yeah. Pato O'Ward is currently the championship leader after 2 races. He has finished second in both of them. And in IndyCar, consistency is key, not just winning. So being consistently at the top like he has, if he can keep that up, he will, I think, be in a pretty good spot. But I'm sure he is very desperate for that first win of the season, because he's been very fast in both races.
Yeah, and it really hasn't been in his hands necessarily getting that second place, like in this race, the safety car. So if he gets a good run, then it should be pretty easy for him, given how he's been performing.
I would say so. Very talented driver, performing definitely at the top of his game. I'm a big Pato fan, a big McLaren fan, so he is the guy I am rooting for to win the championship. But we will see. We will definitely see. But great start to the season for him, for sure. Another great start to the season for Joseph Newgarden. He is in 4th place currently in the championship. He didn't have a great first race, but he obviously won the second race, so he is right in the mix. David Malukas is turning heads in the pit lane. He is his second season. He was a rookie last year, and I don't think he won Rookie of the Year, but I think he was only a couple points behind. Who was it? Was it Lundgaard? I think. No, I don't remember. Maybe he did win the Rookie of the Year. I don't remember. This is why.
Yeah.
I need to research before I talk, but it's okay. Regardless, he did very well last season, and especially at the end of the season, he was putting in great performances, and that has continued into this season. He finished 4th in this race, and way higher up than I think a lot of people were going to give him credit for. And in the post-race interview, he even said that he was kind of surprised. He's up here with all these legendary IndyCar names at the front of the field, and then there he is, just puttering around in 4th place. He was very happy with that result, as he should be.
Yeah.
And then finally we have Alexander Rossi with more bad luck. This guy just can't catch a break.
No.
But he was fast. He was up there in qualifying. I'm sure he's gonna have good results this season with McLaren. It's a great team he's got behind him. So I'm sure the cards will fall for Rossi at some point, but it's he's just kind of the Fernando Alonso of IndyCar, just great driver with a lot of bad luck.
So you're saying give him another 7 years?
Yes, that's what I'm saying, until Aston Martin joins the IndyCar grid and takes it by storm.
Ugh.
But which probably will never happen, but you never know.
I'd leave the country if that happened.
All right, let's go through the standings of the IndyCar season. So far, we're 2 races in. In first place is Pato O'Ward, followed by Marcus Ericsson and Scott Dixon. 4th and 5th are Joseph Newgarden and Alex Palou. 6 through 10 are David Malukas, Callum Ilott, Scott McLaughlin, Will Power, and Alexander Rossi. 11 through 15 are Colton Herta, Augustine Canapino, Graham Rahal, Christian Lundgaard, and Roman Grosjean. 16 through 20 is Rinus VK, Helio Castroneves, Connor Daly, Jack Harvey, and Kyle Kirkwood. 21 through 25 are Stingray Braw, Benjamin Peterson, Marcus Armstrong, Simon Pagenaud, and Felix Rosenqvist. And then 26 through 30 are Ed Carpenter, Santino Ferrucci, Devlin DeFrancesco, Takuma Sato, and we don't have our last one is a racer who has not had an entrance yet into this season, Catherine Leger, who I mistakenly called a rookie in our pre-race shakedown podcast. She is not a rookie. She has run, I think, 11 races in IndyCar back in the early 2010s, but she is back this season. It's been a few years off for her, though. She was out, I think, overseas in Europe doing, I want to say, endurance racing. But anyway, she's back in IndyCar this season, running ovals, I believe, or at the very least, the Indy 500. So she will be in the table eventually. But not a rookie, like I stated. I am sorry about that.
You fooled me. I also didn't recognize the name, so I immediately was like, oh, it must be a new person.
Yeah. All right, that runs off IndyCar for this week. Let's move on to the Formula One Australian Grand Prix at Albert Park in Melbourne.
This is a stupid race.
This race was ridiculous, but we'll get into that.
Okay, yeah, continue.
Qualifying top 10, to give you context, was Max Verstappen on pole position, followed by George Russell, Lewis Hamilton, Fernando Alonso, Carlos Sainz, Lance Stroll, Charles Leclerc, Alex Albon, Pierre Gasly, and Nico Hülkenberg. And once again, Max Verstappen, 2.5 tenths ahead of second place. Absolute rocket ship, that Red Bull this year. But another notable thing is Sergio Perez crashed his car into the wall on his first running lap in Q1, so he started last.
Yeah, well, luckily he didn't crash it. He just beached it in the gravel.
Beached in the gravel, did not crash. He had a braking issue. Actually, it was actually an engine issue. He had problems with his engine braking. Going into turn 1, he had that problem throughout all of FP3, and it continued into qualifying, so they also changed his one of his engine components before the race, and he started from the pit lane because of that.
Yeah.
Along with Valtteri Bottas. So, getting into the race, Verstappen got a bad start, and Russell passed him into turn 1. Verstappen continued his poor showing at the start, and it was passed by Hamilton into turn 3. So, after 3 turns, it was Mercedes 1-2, which was very exciting to see.
Yeah. I feel like Verstappen always has really bad starts.
I mean, this season,
consistently his weak start, like his weak point last season at least.
Yeah, it is kind of interesting. Verstappen's one weakness seems to be that about half the time he gets a very poor start.
Yeah, it's like he rolls a D20 dice.
Yeah,
rolls
like that.
Rolls for race start.
Yeah. Contrasting that, Russell always seems to get good starts. Hamilton's pretty consistent with that. And then Fernando Alonso as well. Also very consistently very good on the start. But moving on turn 3 as well, Leclerc was spun into the gravel after contact with Lance Stroll. Not Stroll's fault, he was squeezed. He had nowhere to go. But that caused the first safety car of the day as Leclerc was beached. I think there were a couple cars in the back that pitted, but no one of interest at the front. And so they went around again after the restart. On lap 7, Albon spun and hit the wall pretty hard into, I believe, turn 8. I think it is. Maybe it's turn 6. I don't remember. Let me look at my map I've got up here. Turn 6.
Yes.
That's why I have the map up there this season.
Yeah, I was like, if only there was a... Oh, there is a map.
Yeah. So Albon spun and hit the wall into turn 6, causing a safety car as there was a car on the racing line and a bunch of gravel spread across the track. Russell and Sainz pitted under the safety car, but after they came out of the pits, a red flag came out and completely screwed up their strategies.
They were not afraid to throw out the red flags this race.
No, they were very generous with the red flags, which I don't know. We can talk about that a little more at the end, but
yeah. Did you watch the race live?
Yes, I did.
Ha!
I did. So, watched almost 3 hours of it.
Awesome.
Yeah. Hamilton stayed ahead on the restart as they restarted from the grid, but Verstappen quickly caught and passed him on lap 12. After that, Russell had an engine failure on lap 18, so even though his strategy was messed up, it would not have mattered. He pulled off to the side of the track, causing a virtual safety car. That didn't really shake things up too much. Perez quickly made his way up the order after starting last. He was quickly up to behind Norris, which would have put, I can't even tell from the order down here, but he was definitely top 10, I would say probably 8th or 9th pretty quickly.
Yeah, he was probably close to that 10th place.
Somewhere in there. On lap 47, Verstappen, who was at this point 10 seconds ahead and managing the race pretty nicely, went wide into the grass on the penultimate corner, but had such a large lead that it didn't really affect his race at all. He only ended up losing about 4 seconds of time. On lap 52, Lando Norris passed Nico Hülkenberg after a battle that lasted for several laps, one of the better battles of the race. It's pretty awesome pass, too. It was definitely a contender for overtake of the week. It did not win it, though. On lap 53, Kevin Magnussen hit the wall and destroyed his rear suspension. He's caused the second red flag of the race. This one was the controversial one because I don't think it really required a red flag at all. But on the restart, chaos ensued. Everything popped off. If you follow F1 on any socials, you've probably seen the clip. Alonso was spun out by Sainz. Sargent took himself and De Vries out of the race into turn 1. Gasly took himself and Ocon out of the race into turn 2. Perez went through the gravel to avoid contact and dropped to the back. Stroll outbraked himself into turn 3 and went super wide into the gravel. And all of this mayhem caused a third red flag. And this red flag was deserved, I believe.
Oh, yeah. I remember watching the first 4 cars make it through, and I let out a breath. I was like, okay, we made it. Nothing bad happened. And I obviously spoke too soon because right after that, this 7 cars in the back just decided to hit the fan.
Yep.
It's ridiculous.
So we waited for 30 minutes to figure out which order they were going to restart the race under, if at all. After a half hour, they decided to restart the race under safety car and run the last lap behind the safety car. So no more racing for the rest of that race, but they decided to run them in the order that they started in at the previous restart because the last red flag was waved before any of the cars passed through Sector 1, so they did not actually have an official order, meaning they had to count back to the order at the start, minus the cars that could no longer run, which unfortunately basically just screwed Alpine over more than anybody else.
Ugh. Yeah, that sucks for them.
Absolutely. And in addition to that, Carlos Sainz was given a 5-second penalty for his contact with Fernando Alonso, pretty controversially, as Logan Sargent was not given a penalty thus far. As at the time of this recording, Logan Sargent does not have a grid penalty or anything for Azerbaijan, even though he absolutely took De Vries out. So there are some people kind of upset about that.
Are you
not
one
least
of those
of which
people?
Carlos Sainz. I don't know. I do think that Sargent's mistake was a lot more heinous than Sainz's.
Fair.
So if they gave Sainz a 5-second penalty at the end of the race, I think they should at the very least give Sargent a three place grid penalty, which is kind of the equivalent for the next race. But as far as we're aware right now, that has not happened.
Give them a few years. They'll get around to it.
Yeah, it's FIA things. Consistency is key.
Yep.
But that's part of the joy of F1. Say what you want about the FIA. It's a very difficult sport to govern, and not everybody's going to be happy all the time.
Yep. It's kind of like watching a cat on the table. Eventually it's going to push the salt shaker off, but in the meantime, it generally makes okay decisions, but when it doesn't, it's really entertaining.
That's a good way to put it. And I don't think I ever would have thought of that analogy, but
my girlfriend has a
to you, Ben.
cat, so I've been spending a lot more time around cats. I've learned many things.
Yeah, my girlfriend has 2 cats, and I love watching them fight each other all the time. It's pretty entertaining.
Yeah, I don't know if I do 2 cats yet. She's trying to convince me, but
yeah,
I'm a dog person.
Luckily, I'm a cat person, so it works out well. But anyway, we'll go on to the results of the race. in first place with the win was Max Verstappen, followed by Lewis Hamilton and Fernando Alonso on the podium after the safety car restart. Fourth place was Lance Stroll, followed by Sergio Perez. In fifth, 6 through 10 was Lando Norris, Nico Hülkenberg, Oscar Piastri, Zhou Guanyu, and Yuki Tsunoda. 11 and 12, rounding off the finishers, were Valtteri Bottas and Carlos Sainz after he took his 5-second penalty. And then we have 13 through 16 who were technically classified but also did not finish the race, were Pierre Gasly, Esteban Ocon, Nick DeVries, and Logan Sargent. And then the non-classified DNFers were Kevin Magnussen, George Russell, Alex Albon, and Charles Leclerc. So, Verstappen still looks unstoppable after 3 races. I just don't see him not winning the championship with the consistency and speed that he has in that car.
Yeah, there's no way.
But I mean, you never know. But it's insane.
Anything could happen, but it's faster than last year's car. It's more reliable so far than last year's car. And last year he walked away with the championship, so I can only imagine what this year is going to be like for him.
Yeah, reliability is an interesting point with the Red Bull, because I'd actually say that that's their weakness so far this year. The only weakness they've had is reliability. It's honestly, it's not as bad as last season, obviously, where they had 2 DNFs, more than 2 for Red Bull, but 2 for Max in the first 3 races. No race-ending reliability problems, but in 2 of the 3 races, Verstappen has had issues. He had a problem in Bahrain, which he was able to manage. I think it was with his power steering. I want to say something went haywire.
Or was it his driveline? No, his driveline was Saudi Arabia.
That was Saudi Arabia.
Right.
That was the next race. Yep. And then he had more downshifting problems in free practice in Australia as well. And then Perez also had engine braking problems in Australia.
Yeah, so not catastrophic reliability issues, but maybe still something to keep an eye on.
Yep, things that are definitely slowing them down at the very least, and maybe possibly bringing other cars into being competitive with them, but at the same time, not really.
Yeah.
So, we'll see how the reliability shakes out, but if they do have an Achilles heel, I would say that is going to be it this season. Verstappen looks unstoppable. On the other side of the Red Bull garage, Perez kind of got stuck in the midfield this race. I think a lot of people thought he was going to finish higher, even starting last, just because that Red Bull's a rocket ship. He did fly through the first half of the field, but then once he got behind Lando Norris, he kind of just sat there.
Yeah, Australia is definitely a place where DRS trains tend to stack up with so many DRS zones.
Sure. Especially, there were 4 DRS zones in at the Albert Park circuit, which I think is the most on the calendar.
Yeah, last year they experimented with 4 and then dialed it back to just 3, but this year they went full hog.
Yeah, they dialed it back last year because I think there were safety concerns because it was so early on in the season that not everybody quite had their car figured out yet because it was the first season of the new regulations.
Oh, right. Porpoising was the thing.
And porpoising was the thing, which I think is what ended up cutting that 4th DRS zone. But this season, porpoising has been pretty much eliminated. It's still a factor, but not nearly as much as last season. So they decided to go with the 4 DRS zones. And honestly, as much as people say that it was boring in the middle of the race, while it wasn't super exciting, there were overtakes throughout the whole race in the midfield. Nothing for the lead, but that's just because Verstappen ran off into the distance.
Yeah.
But there was a cat and mouse game between Alonso and Hamilton. I think Alonso stuck behind Hamilton intentionally. And then the restart just kind of changed everything. So we didn't really get to see how that shook out. But it was I think it was actually a pretty entertaining race, as much as people said it was kind of boring in the middle.
Yeah.
I was entertained the whole time.
Yeah, that's not to say I didn't find myself maybe losing a little bit of tension during the middle, but it was by no means a boring race.
Yeah,
And,
not at all.
the red flags definitely kept things interesting.
Absolutely.
Which compared to Hungary in 2021, which do you think Hungary in 2021 was worse or this restart?
Are you talking about when Bottas went bowling?
Yeah.
I think in terms of the implications it had on the race, I think Hungary was probably a little more chaotic. Just because it was all of the front runners that were involved. And I think there were more DNFs as a result. I think only 11 cars finished Hungary that year.
Only 11 cars finished this race.
No, it was 12, I
Or
think.
12? Okay.
Yeah. But very similar. But Hungary, again, was a great race. Ocon won that race. So, I don't know. I mean, both, they were pretty similar in terms of both happened at turn one. People just hitting other cars and causing chaos. Both were very entertaining to watch.
Yeah.
And will be remembered for a long time.
Yeah. Maybe after this podcast is done, I'll go back and watch replays from Hungary 2021. That was a good time.
It was a good race. Very good race, yeah. That was the race where Hamilton was the only one to restart the race on wet tires. He took the lights by himself. That was awesome. And that was also the race where George Russell scored his first points with Williams. So there was a lot to unpack with that race. That was if you want to watch a fun race, that was definitely a candidate.
Yeah.
Come back to 2023. Valtteri Bottas is struggling big time this year. I'm not sure what's going on with him, but Joe has him absolutely outpaced, and Bottas is just nowhere. He's been last, I think, the last two races, and we're at least very close to the back. Not sure what's going on with Bottas.
Yeah, I don't know. I can't afford to have another Finnish driver driving for Alfa Romeo be finishing last all the time. I dealt with that enough with Kimi.
Yeah.
My heart can't take it.
We'll have to see. I don't know. I hope he can find his mojo. He might have to trim up that mullet. Maybe that's bad luck.
I don't know. But yeah, on the flip side, Joe Guanyu has been doing really well.
Yes, maybe that's what it is. Maybe Bottas, maybe that car is just not that great, and Joe Guanyu is just out driving it.
Maybe.
That could be as well.
Yeah, but it's cool to see him get an actual opportunity to show off his capabilities in a car that doesn't break down every lap.
For sure. So far.
So far.
Yeah. McLaren finally scores points this season. They moved themselves up from last place in the Constructors' Championship. They're up in 5th place now. Quite the jump, but it's still early on in the season. I'm just glad to not see them at the very bottom as a McLaren fan. I was getting a little sad there. But actually, even regardless of the chaos that got them both into the points, they both drove a much better race than the last two.
Yeah.
Especially Lando.
Yeah, so maybe a little bit of hope that the cars aren't as terrible as originally thought.
Yep, and they're coming with upgrades in Azerbaijan, so hopefully that turns things around for them.
Yeah.
I would love to see McLaren back, at the very least, in the midfield. Because as far as I can tell from just watching, seeing how he's performing, Oscar Piastri is doing very well for his rookie season in terms of relative to Lando. I think better than a lot of people thought.
Yeah, this has been a good season for rookies.
Yes. Haas is firmly wedged in the midfield this season, as far as we can tell. Nico Hülkenberg is actually consistently outperforming Kevin Magnussen in that team, which I don't think anybody saw coming. He just jumped in that car and is pretty quick. He's actually very fast. He's been consistently in the top 10 and top of the midfield even. I think he's surprising a lot of people this season and proving a lot of people wrong. So I'm actually very happy for him.
Yeah, I'm still upset about Mick losing his seat, but
Yes.
I'm glad at least Hulkenberg's doing well in exchange.
Yeah.
So that's an okay trade-off.
One thing that is kind of sad is on the final restart, one of the options the FIA had was to use the order that ended up shaking out after all of the chaos ensued. And if they used the order at after all the crashes, Hulkenberg was in 4th place, and ahead of him was Carlos Sainz, who would have incurred a 5-second penalty.
Wow.
So, if they restarted the race in that order, Nico Hulkenberg would have gotten his first podium.
That would have been pretty cool.
That would have been pretty cool. Unfortunately.
That happened in an alternate universe.
In an alternate universe, Nico Hulkenberg breaks his streak, but that's it did not happen in this universe, unfortunately for him. Hopefully this season he gets a podium. I could see it happening with how quick he's been. Maybe if there's another chaotic race. I don't think anything's gonna beat this one, but you never know. Maybe he ends up with a P3. I'd love to see it.
That'd be pretty neat. Yeah, I think it would take something catastrophic for that to happen, but catastrophic things happen all the time in F1.
Yes. Moving on to Ferrari. This is the worst start to Ferrari season since 2009. Points-wise, it's been pretty bad. I thought it had been longer, but apparently 2009 was horrific. So, yeah, this is worse than 2020, and that's saying something, because 2020 was
bad.
Not good for Ferrari.
Yeah. 2020 was where Ferrari cemented themselves as a midfield team at best.
Midfield at best, yeah. But they have one less point after 3 races than they did in 2020, partially due to Sainz dropping out of the points in this race and Leclerc having 2 DNFs to start his season.
Yeah. Yeah, Leclerc's really not having a good go of it.
No.
And it doesn't really seem... It seems mostly to be him pushing a little too hard. Well,
yeah.
Maybe I
guess not this race, but even in Bahrain, where his other DNF was, he just had an engine failure.
Yeah.
But then he didn't. I think he finished 4th in Saudi Arabia, something like that.
Maybe I was thinking. Maybe I was thinking something else.
No, it was definitely Russell that finished 4th because there was all that drama with the Alonso podium.
Oh, yeah.
So he finished probably 5th, or I don't know where he finished in Saudi Arabia. It's been long enough. But the encouraging thing for Leclerc fans is that he DNF'd 2 of the first 3 races, and it was the same 2 of the first 3 races that Max Verstappen DNF'd last season. So there's a chance Charles Leclerc could come back and win the championship. That's all I'm saying.
Pure copium.
Yep.
100%.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen, but you never know. Formula 1's pretty crazy. Oscar Piastri scored his first points at home this race. Awesome to see for him. He would have finished 11th had chaos not ensued, but he did not finish 11th. So, he'll take the points.
Yeah.
Good home race for him. Even if he did finish 11th, it was definitely a good showing from him in that McLaren. It's not the best car at the moment.
I think it keeps him above Alpine.
Yes. Yep. And I think he enjoyed his first race at home, which I'm sure is quite the surreal experience for any driver.
Yeah. Yeah, he's got a pretty good home track.
Yeah. Especially with the fans. The Australian fans are awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, something like 400,000 people.
Yeah.
At the race.
Crazy. It's like Coda numbers.
Ugh.
That's
don't
pretty
remind me.
And then lastly, Mercedes is right on Aston Martin's heels at the moment. Pace-wise, points-wise, I think that's going to be the battle for P2 between Mercedes, Aston Martin, and I think Ferrari will eventually get into that battle again. I think they've just had a bad start. But pace-wise, Ferrari is right in there with those three.
Yeah.
Carlos Sainz got screwed over by the first red flag. Otherwise, he cut his way through the field very quickly to get up into, I think, fourth. So, Ferrari has the pace. They just don't have the luck at the moment, which seems to be the story of Ferrari.
Yeah.
All right. That kind of rounds up the race, the Australian Grand Prix. Let's go through the championship standings now that we're 3 races into the season. In first place is Max Verstappen, followed by Sergio Perez and Fernando Alonso. 4th and 5th are Lewis Hamilton and Carlos Sainz. 6 through 10 are Lance Stroll, George Russell, Lando Norris, Nico Hülkenberg, and Charles Leclerc. 11 through 15 are Valtteri Bottas, Esteban Ocon, Oscar Piastri, Pierre Gasly, and Zhou Guanyu. 16 through 20 are Yuki Tsunoda, Kevin Magnussen, Alex Albon, Logan Sargent, and Nick DeVries. Logan Sargent and DeVries are the only 2 drivers that have yet to score points this season. It's actually pretty encouraging that after 3 races, 18 drivers have already scored points.
Yeah, and both Sargent and, well, maybe not DeVries. I can't really recall DeVries' most recent placements. But I feel like at least Sargent has been pretty close to the points, in terms of pace at least.
Except for this race.
Where he was very far off.
Yes. He couldn't figure out this track or something. Maybe something was wrong with the car. It's hard to know. But the first 2 races, especially Sargent, was, I would say, definitely top 15.
Yeah,
definitely right up
Albon.
there. Yeah, for sure. And then Nick DeVries actually has been not that great this season. I thought he was going to be stellar, but he has been outperformed by Yuki Tsunoda for sure. Kind of moving around at the back of the field for all the races he's been in so far. Hopefully he can find his mojo and get into, at least the top 15 and challenge for points.
Yeah.
But moving on to the Constructors' Championship, in first place by a country mile is Red Bull Racing with 123 points. Aston Martin is second, followed by Mercedes in third, Ferrari in fourth, McLaren in fifth, ahead of Alpine in sixth, and Haas in seventh. Alfa Romeo is eighth, AlphaTauri is ninth, and Williams is where Williams usually is, in 10th place.
Yep, but everybody does have at least 1 point.
Yes,
season.
there are no teams with 0 points, which is actually awesome to see.
Yeah.
So, actually, in that regard, I don't know. I think AlphaTauri and Williams are tied at 1 point. I think they're also possibly tied in the first round of the tiebreaker with a 10th place. Well, actually, that's the only result. So they are just going back in tiebreakers right now in terms of the most highest placements, I guess. I don't know how to explain that. But we'll see. I think with the way Albon is driving, I could very easily see Williams jumping up into kind of more the middle of the midfield.
Yeah. Albon versus Tsunoda. Albon definitely, I think, is going to be outscoring Tsunoda all the time.
And without chaos, I don't think either of the Alfa Romeos... Well, where did Joe finish this race? He finished in 9th. So I guess they would have 4 points without chaos. But I also think that it's very possible that Williams finishes ahead of Alfa Romeo this season at the very least.
Yeah.
With the way Nico Hülkenberg is driving, I don't see Williams beating Haas.
No, Haas is where the line is on actual competitive cars.
I would say so. And then the bottom 3 are going to be Alfa Romeo and AlphaTauri, and then Williams.
Yeah.
So that's the Constructors' Championship, and that rounds off our Formula One coverage for this week. Let's move on to our paddock news. We only have one thing to talk about.
Yeah, I see it's just one bullet point. This is Felipe Massa.
Yes, I added it last second before we started. And let's talk about this real quick. Felipe Massa has been pondering the idea of filing a lawsuit or an investigation of some sort into the FIA's decision to not cancel the 2008 Singapore Grand Prix. And this all revolves around something known in the F1 community as Crashgate, where Nelson Piquet Jr., who was Fernando Alonso's teammate at Renault that season, crashed on purpose in Singapore to benefit Fernando Alonso's race. Fernando was, I think, out of the points, and because of where all the drivers were and how everything shaked out, Piquet crashed, causing a bunch of people to pit, and Fernando went to the front of the field. I don't remember if he won that race, but he was definitely on the podium. This started this whole controversy that ended up being dealt with a year later in 2009. And there were fines, people were fired, people were banned from F1. It was a whole big thing. But anyway, at the end of the season, Lewis Hamilton beat Felipe Massa for the World Championship by a single point. And if Singapore was excluded from the classifications, then Felipe Massa would end up being the 2008 Formula One World Champion. And this is where all the drama starts, because this week, Bernie Ecclestone, who was the guy in charge of F1 at the time, said he knew about Crashgate, he knew about the intentional crash, and he would have, under the regulations, needed to exclude that race from the calendar, but he did not want to start a controversy. He wanted to save face for the sport, and so he did nothing until the next season when everything was over. That was brought to light this week, and so now Felipe Massa is considering legal action, but 15 years have gone by, and so who knows how far he can get with that.
No, nothing's gonna happen. There's
nothing's
no way.
Gonna happen. No, because if they change the result and take Lewis Hamilton's first world championship away and then give it to Felipe Massa, the FIA would be opening a whole can of worms, and the 2021 season would undoubtedly be called into question because of how the season ended. But unfortunately, I think if they did that, unfortunately for Lewis, I think they would just exclude Abu Dhabi from the classifications, and Max Verstappen would win on a tiebreaker anyway.
Yeah, well, there are probably so many scenarios like that throughout the years that can have the same logic applied to them.
Yeah.
So it's useless trying to go through and whittle down each one. And racing is so variable anyways. I mean, who's to say that any of these outcomes were guaranteed in the first place?
Yeah. Part of why racing is such a fun sport to watch is because chaos happens, and, decisions are made that affect things that, not everybody's happy with. But that's just part of the sport. And so if we're going to get into suing people for results, especially results that are 15 years ago, I think we're just it's like, what are we doing here?
Yeah, it's a fun headline, but nothing else.
Yeah. I just wanted to mention that in case something does come of it, because if something does come of it, it's going to be gigantic news, and oh boy. But this will probably most likely be the last we hear of this.
Yeah. But who knows?
Who knows? All right, moving on to Pit Stop Championship. We only had 11 official non-red flag pit stops this race. Actually, we had a couple more, but only 11 individual cars made non-red flag pit stops. So, starting with the winner this race, Sergio Perez, continuing his form from last season with a time of 2.11 seconds. He wins this race followed by Ocon and Sainz on the podium. Fourth and fifth were Sargent and De Vries. 6 through 10, rounding off the points finishers, were Tsunoda, Zhou, Bottas, Russell, and Piastri. And then in 11th place was Kevin Magnussen. So, let's go through the Pit Stop Championship standings real quick, because it's been a few races. In first place for the Drivers' Championship is Charles Leclerc, followed by Sergio Perez and Carlos Sainz. Fourth and fifth are Ocon and Verstappen. Verstappen down at fifth in a Red Bull. That's interesting. And then 6 through 10 is Russell, Hamilton, Tsunoda, Sargent, and Gasly. 11 through 15 is De Vries, Stroll, Zhou, Magnussen, and Bottas. And then 16 through 20 is Alonso, Norris, Albon, Piastri, and Hülkenberg. All right. Constructors' Championship. Ferrari in first place, followed by Red Bull and Alpine. Fourth and fifth are Mercedes and AlphaTauri. 6 through 10 are Williams, Aston Martin, Alfa Romeo, Haas, and McLaren, rounding off the order. So McLaren's still at the bottom in one aspect.
Yep. Hey, tractor tires take a long time to swap on and off.
Yep. Okay, that rounds off our Pit Stop Championship segment. Let's move on to the overtake of the week. I gave this to Pato Award with his overtake on Roman Grosjean and Alex Palou on lap 221 of the PPG 375. Crazy double overtake down the inside, 3 wide into turn 3.
Oh, yeah. Anytime you go 3 wide on an oval, that's got to be a guaranteed pass. Pass win. Overtake of the week. Yeah.
Absolutely beautiful. And just the move, the speed he had, it was, perfect. All right, so congrats to Pato on that. Now it's time for everybody's favorite segment, the weekly predictions. Let's go through our predictions for last week. Okay, PPG 375, pole position went to Felix Rosenqvist. I said Pato Award. What did you say?
I had Marcus Ericsson.
Fair enough. He's very strong on ovals, and he was very strong this week as well.
Just not strong enough.
Not quite. And then the podium, just to remind everybody, this is not in any particular order. Podium ended up being Newgarden, O'Ward, and Palou. My guesses were Newgarden, O'Ward, and Rossi, so I actually did pretty well. What did you say, Ben?
I had Ericsson, Power, and Palou. So I at least got Palou, but Ericsson and Power were not quite close enough to the top for me.
Yeah. But between the two of us, we got all 3. So
yeah,
I'm happy with that.
Yeah, it's like the law of averages.
Yeah.
Which isn't a real law, I need to remind people.
Yes,
but,
no.
Yeah.
Mr. Johnson made that very clear in senior year statistics class.
Yeah.
Shout out to Mr. Johnson if you're listening. Probably not, but it's a fun class. Anyway, winning number of pit stops, we were so far off.
How could we have known that there'd be 4 safety cars?
Yeah, pretty insane. Newgarden won the race after 6 pit stops.
Yeah.
Which blows my mind. I don't even remember how he got 6 pit stops because O'Ward had 4. I don't know, man, but oh my goodness, 6 pit stops and he won the race. That's crazy.
Yeah,
we both guessed 2.
I'm now thinking 2 was maybe a little low, even without the safety cars. But
I think it's been long enough without an oval race to where we kind of forgot how oval races work.
Yeah, and
given we will not make that mistake next time.
Given that we both started taking a more vested interest in IndyCar last season, we still have a lot of things to learn, I think.
Yeah. Especially with pit stop strategy. It's so complicated and so varied.
Yeah.
But that's why I love watching IndyCar.
It's a learning experience every time.
Absolutely. All right. Let's move on to the Australian Grand Prix predictions. Top 5, just to remind everybody, was Verstappen, Hamilton, Alonso, Stroll, and Perez. My guess was Verstappen, Perez, Stroll, Alonso, and Leclerc, with my dark horse being Gasly. Verstappen was my only correct one that time.
Yep. It was a bad week for both of our dark horses. Because Ocon also got taken out.
Yep.
The Gasly crashed into your dark horse crashed into my dark horse.
Yes.
But yeah, I had Verstappen, Perez, Russell, Alonso, and Leclerc.
Yep. And then if Gasly had not crashed into Ocon, I believe Gasly was running in 4th at the restart. So my dark horse might have hit.
Yeah.
I was fingers crossed for sure, but unfortunately that did not happen. And once again, we go another week with horrible predictions. But who could have predicted that race?
Yeah. Fastest lap.
Fastest lap. What's this? Sergio Perez this week.
Which?
And I guess Fernando Alonso.
I was correct. I guessed Perez. Unfortunately, driver of the day was also Perez, and neither of us guessed that.
Nope. I guessed Pierre Gasly, and it was very incorrect.
Yeah, I had Russell. Both of ours DNF'd.
Yep. Unfortunate. All right, moving on to this week's predictions, starting with the IndyCar Grand Prix of Long Beach. We have 2 IndyCar races before the next episode of RevHang will air. So, first one is Long Beach. Let's start with pole position. I went with Romain Grosjean.
And I went with Joseph Newgarden.
Okay, Newgarden hype train continues for Ben.
Yep, although Grosjean is a really good choice for Long Beach.
Yes. Yep, he got pole in St. Petersburg, and we have another tight street circuit in Long Beach, and I would not be surprised if he did very well. Moving on to the podium prediction, I have Scott Dixon, Pato O'Ward, and Marcus Ericsson.
And I have Power, Herta, and Rossi. I actually thought about putting Grosjean on the podium there, but maybe not. I don't know.
We'll see. I hope so. I want him to win a race so bad this year.
Yeah, but also kind of want to see Rossi get up there too.
Absolutely.
That'd be pretty cool.
Rossi needs that confidence boost. It's been too long since he's won a race. All right, winning number of pit stops for Long Beach, I went with 3.
And I went with 4.
Okay. All right, moving on to the Alabama Grand Prix. Pole position, I went with Scott McLaughlin.
And I went with Scott Dixon.
All right, one of them will be from New Zealand. Confirmed. All right, podium, I went with McLaughlin, Grosjean, and Rossi.
And I have Palou, Power, and O'Ward.
All right, and the winning number of pit stops, I said 4.
I went with 3. Who knows, maybe there will be a safety car that lets the top spot get an extra fuel pit stop in.
You went with 3?
Or 5, yep.
Okay.
Yeah, 3 plus 2.
There we go. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Now moving on to the Azerbaijan Grand Prix coming up in 3 weeks' time. Top 5. Why don't you go first, Ben?
Oh boy. So I went really boring, except for my dark horse. I went with Verstappen, Perez, Alonso, Hamilton, and Stroll, with Albon as my dark horse. You did not go very conservative with this.
I did not, and I'll explain why. But first, my top 5 is Alonso, Hamilton, Stroll, Russell, and Gasly, with my dark horse being Nico Hülkenberg. So, my prediction is Max Verstappen, the absolute legend, versus Sergio Perez, the king of street circuits and the king of Baku. We have a repeat of 2018 with the Red Bulls crashing into each other.
Oh no.
So, that's my 2 cents. It will probably not happen, but with things getting spicy at Red Bull last year, and Sergio Perez unwilling to back down from Max anymore, with this being one of Perez's best tracks, I could see this happening.
Fair point.
But we'll see. And if it does happen, it'll be a very entertaining race to watch.
Yeah, severe hijinks.
Yes, absolutely. So that is my prediction. That's why my top 5 looks kind of insane. And it is kind of
Alrighty.
insane.
Yeah.
All right. Fastest lap. What'd you say?
I've got Verstappen.
Okay. And I've got Pierre Gasly. My reason being, he will probably be detached from the top 4 should this Perez-Verstappen crash happen. And so he will have clean air in front of him. And the Alpines have been very fast in a straight line this season.
All right. So hedging your bets again with
Yes.
the Red Bull double crash.
Yes.
Okay.
All right. Driver of the day. What'd you say?
Albon.
And I've got Alonso, and this one could happen regardless of whether the Red Bulls crash or not.
Yeah. I figure if Albon gets anywhere near like 8th place, I figure that could be a shoe-in for driver of the day.
It's possible. It'll be interesting to see. I don't know if the Mercedes engine is up to par at a track with a straight like Baku, but who knows? We'll see. All right. Ben, do you have any words of wisdom for our lovely listeners this week?
The days are getting brighter. You're going to want to start waking up earlier. You're going to want to start drinking more coffee as the sun starts coming out and there's more stuff to do. But, just whether you think it affects you or not, I think it's a good idea to, maybe 1 or 2 weeks every other month or so, take a break from caffeine. Take a tolerance break. Make sure you're not getting any headaches or anything like that, because the last thing you want is to be dependent on that sweet, sweet dark liquid to get you out of bed in the morning and get you to your appointments and your meetings with friends and keep you awake on a hike or something like that. So just make sure you're watching your caffeine intake.
Awesome. Good stuff, Ben. All right, everybody, that rounds off this episode of RevHang. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, leave a like or rating on the platform you listened on. It really helps us out. If you want to see updated standings for IndyCar and F1 or a calendar of upcoming races from all sorts of different series, check out our website, revhang.com. If you have a question about racing or about us, hit us up on Twitter using hashtag RevHangPodcast, and we may feature your question on the next show. You can also follow Ben on Instagram at BenjiMeetsWorld and myself at 2N_squared. We'll be back in about a month to cover the Azerbaijan Grand Prix and both of the upcoming IndyCar races. Until then, I have been Nathan.
And I'm Ben.
Thanks for hanging out.
See you later.